and this is The Dirty Word, where sex and language get it on. Today, we're gonna be talking about my top 5 favorite book recommendations this summer, especially if you're interested in language, gender, pop culture, or all of the above. So these books are pretty new. All of them have been published in the past 2 or 3 years, so just wanna keep it relevant for you. The first one is actually a coffee table book, so you're not gonna be doing too much actual reading here, but it's an awesome book if you are a language lover or a nerd like me, and it's an amazing conversation piece. I always get compliments when people come over to my house and see this on my coffee table. It's called Lost in Translation, an illustrated compendium of untranslatable words from around the world by Ella Francis Sanders. Basically, this book is just a roundup of really beautiful, interesting words that exist in foreign languages for which we have no equivalent in English. On each page you'll find the word, the definition, the language it comes from, and a really beautiful illustration. I'll read one of my favorites just as an example. This word is from Arabic, and I'm probably gonna completely butcher its pronunciation, but it's Ya'aberne. It's a noun meaning you bury me. A beautifully morbid declaration of one's hope that they will die before another person, as it would be too difficult living without them. So beautiful. This book is full of words like that. It's really fun to flip through and just a great addition to your coffee table library, if you will. My next book recommendation is a book of essays. This is called Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit. You might recognize the title essay in this book. It actually inspired the slang term mansplaining, which probably sounds familiar. Rebecca Solnit didn't make up the word mansplaining, but it was inspired by this title essay. The essay talks about an experience that she had once where she went to a party, met a man for the first time, they got into conversation, and he started talking to her about this amazing new book that he just read. He was talking about how complex the subject matter was, going on and on, implying that she had no idea what she was talking about, she couldn't possibly understand the book, and he wouldn't let her get a word in edgewise until the very end of this long explanation when she finally told him, dude, I wrote that book. Rebecca Solnit is a really prolific writer. She's written like 17 million books across a variety of topics, and this is just one of them. It's a really quick read, just a few essays in here, all of which speak to similar topics. Gender, society. They're kind of infuriating, but really fascinating and relatable if you're a woman, so definitely recommend that. My next book here is another book of creative nonfiction. It's called The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. I think this would be classified as an experimental memoir. In it, the author talks about her experience developing a relationship with her significant other, who is gender nonconforming, and it follows their journey having a child together. Throughout it, there is a lot of cultural criticism and commentary, specifically on the subjects of gender and identity and normativity, and the perspectives here are just really fascinating and the content really rich. What's unique about this book is that in it she quotes a lot of people, but every time she does, she weaves the quote organically into her own text and then sneaks the name of whoever spoke the quote into the margins. So you get a really rich book here full of different people's perspectives without any of the clunkiness of like quotations and things like that. So I thought that was really creative. If you're interested in gender or memoirs or just really interesting cultural perspectives told in an intellectual way, I really recommend this book. It's also worth noting that I never annotate books when I read them. I never underline things or highlight them. I kind of just burn right through them, especially if I'm super into the book. But there are so many lines in this book that are so beautiful and interesting and unique that I kind of just had to underline them. Let's see if I can find a good one to read to you guys. Here's a unique gem. Maggie Nelson says, and I quote, "Genitalia of all stripes are often slimy and pendulous and repulsive. That's part of their charm." Unquote. Maggie Nelson, preaching the truth. So the next book I have here is a novel. I lost the book jacket somewhere along the way, so it looks a little sad, but this is The First Bad Man by Miranda July, who's an artist and a writer and one of my personal heroes. This was her first ever novel. How do I even describe this book? It centers on this protagonist who's a middle-aged woman named Cheryl, who's kind of odd and eccentric. She has some OCD tendencies. She's single, she lives alone. She has this giant crush on this man that she works with named Philip. And out of nowhere, her life is completely shaken and rocked to its core because she's forced to allow her boss's 20-something-year-old daughter to move in with her. This 20-something-year-old daughter is really rude and inconsiderate and, as it turns out, kind of violent. Her name is Clee, and I don't want to spoil anything because I really think that everyone out there should read this book. It's so strange and unique and amazing. But what ensues in the relationship between these two women is just like, I can't put it into words how like fascinating and bizarre it is. I don't know what goes on in the mind of Miranda July, but she's somehow able to create these stories that are intensely and profoundly human and at the same time utterly bizarre. This is like the type of book that sticks with you for months, if not years after you read it. It doesn't really have to do with gender and language and pop culture explicitly, but if you're interested in reading about relationships between women, you've gotta give this one a try. It's so good. And the last book I'm going to recommend is something you've probably seen around the town, maybe at a Barnes & Noble or an airport. This is the first novel from an author named Emma Cline. It's everywhere right now. It's a bestseller and brand new. It's a book of fiction that's based on the Manson family. It's fiction, but there are a lot of very close parallels. What's fascinating about this book is that instead of focusing on the charismatic sociopathic cult leader, like a lot of books about cults do, instead it focuses on the relationships of the girls in the cult. How they influence each other, how they indoctrinate each other, how they kind of fall in love with each other in a way. The main character and narrator is this 14-year-old girl who kind of gets involved with the cult that the book talks about. She just absolutely falls for this woman, this 19-year-old who's in the cult, and the book is mostly about their relationship, and it's just such a fascinating perspective on this topic. If you're interested in gender and pop culture specifically, you've got to read this one. So that's about it. These are my summer book recommendations. I hope this gave you some inspiration for what to read when you're sitting on a plane or on vacation or when you get off work early on a summer Friday. Now hopefully you have something good to read. And I want to know, have you read any of these books? What do you think? And what are some of your favorite summer recommendations? I'd love to know and put them on my reading list. So leave me a comment. And remember, stay dirty.